Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching The World Report here at the headlines. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet US President Donald Trump to hold pivotal talks on the Middle East. Israeli delegations are being sent to Doha to discuss the Gaza ceasefire and potentially look towards any potential extension to the 42-day truce deal agreed with Hamas. China's finance minister has imposed additional tariffs of up to 15% on American goods in response to Trump's 10% duty on all Chinese goods. As trade tensions escalate, China has also announced measures targeting American firms, including Google. Meanwhile, President Trump has agreed to pause 25% tariffs set to impact Mexico and Canada after agreements were struck with the border nations' leaders. Justin Trudeau agreed to reinforce Canadian borders against the flow of migrants and drugs, while Claudia Sheinbaum will send thousands of troops to the Mexican border. The UN has reported an alarming rise in Russian executions of captured Ukrainian soldiers as strikes from Kyiv have again targeted a major Russian oil refinery. Meanwhile, the EU has signalled that rules over debt could be changed to allow more defence spending amid the war. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet President Donald Trump at the White House on Tuesday. This marks the first foreign leader visit of Trump's second term at a critical point for the Gaza ceasefire. Netanyahu is facing political pressure at home, with his far-right allies threatening to leave his coalition over the ceasefire deal. Despite a temporary ceasefire, Netanyahu maintains that Israel retains the right to resume fighting against Hamas. Trump has claimed credit for the 6-week ceasefire, which has already seen hostages released and humanitarian aid flow into Gaza. Key talks are expected to shape the next stage of the ceasefire agreement. Joining us first, we have Aditya Wadwan, our correspondent. Aditya, I'd like to ask mainly about the conversation that Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump are going to have. What do you think the significance of this meeting is?
Well, it is actually a very significant meeting between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, because it is the first meeting of Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu since in his second term, since the Trump has become president of the United States of America for the second term. However, it needs to be seen from here on where these discussions are headed towards. But it is a very pivotal discussion that happened and will continue to happen between the two leaders, because as Trump had said during his election speeches, that all hell will break loose if till he takes over as the president, if all the Israeli hostages are not released. So as we can see that so far the Israeli hostages have been some of the Israeli hostages have been released. The ceasefire deal between the two sides is in progress. At the same time, it needs to be seen by when will it be completed. It will take some time as by when would the entire situation be open. So far, this Donald Trump is known to be absolutely pro-Israel when it comes to adopting approach towards Israel. We saw what in his first term also he had an absolutely pro-Israel approach. He had, facilitated the friendship between the UAE and Israel, So this needs to be seen from here on as to how this entire situation in the Middle East proceeds. Yes, Josh.
Also joining us to discuss this topic, we have Yeshaya Rosenman, who's the project director at India-Israel Military Project, joining us live from Israel. Thank you very much for your time, Yeshaya. I'd like to look at what Israel is looking to gain out of this next stage of potential ceasefire negotiations. What do you think the goal for Netanyahu is, and what do you think he's going to try and get from Donald Trump in this conversation?
Hi, good afternoon. So the only thing that Israel is posed to gain from the second stage of the hostage deal, if it happens, would be the release of hostages. On all other fronts, many in Israel would say that it would be a net loss, meaning that Hamas would remain in power. And given that Hamas's ideology is total and perpetual war against Israel, it would just be a countdown to the next round of conflict. So this is precisely what Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, this is the gun that he has put on the table. He said that if Hamas remains in power, he will topple Netanyahu's government. So Netanyahu is here in a very, very delicate state, given that there is part of the Israeli public demanding the hostage deal, whereas his coalition and another part of the Israeli public want Hamas toppled and their regime ended in Gaza, whatever the day after will look like. So that is on the Gaza front. Beyond that, this is Netanyahu's first meeting with Trump in his second term. After Trump had left his first term, there were some signs of acrimony. Trump was angry, losing second elections, and he had said disparaging remarks about Prime Minister Netanyahu. So this is first of all a meeting, to get back on good terms with President Trump. There will be a joint press conference, the first such press conference with a foreign leader that President Trump is having. On the agenda will be, of course, what is going to be Trump's signature foreign policy initiative in his second term, normalization agreements with Saudi Arabia, what he was called the Abraham Accord agreements, expanding them to Saudi Arabia. That will be Trump's showcase piece of foreign policy. So that is on the agenda, establishing what the terms for that could be. Beyond that, there's the possibility of attacking Iran, either the nuclear facilities and or the oil refineries in Iran to cripple Iran, to stop it from spreading terror across the world. Beyond that, and also, of course, additional negotiations about Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu is meeting Steve Witkoff, the special envoy to the Middle East, and there's a question of what the day after will look like in Gaza, the possibility of relocating Gazans after the war, and it should also be noticed that in leading up to this meeting today, President Trump has already talked about signing a $1 billion deal, a weapons deal with Israel, allowing Israel 4,700 one-ton bombs and armed bulldozers that the Biden administration had withheld from Israel. So there already have been signs of goodwill from the Trump administration.
Yes, Yashai, I very quickly want to build on that. Obviously, we know Trump's rhetoric over Hamas. He's made threats even before being inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States. And we know that Israel have been calling this a temporary ceasefire. So is there a potential that this meeting has a military goal as well?
Yes, very much so. President Trump has been quoted just yesterday as saying there are no guarantees the Gaza ceasefire will hold. So yes, that is definitely on the table. A possibility that the first stage of the ceasefire will be the last, and Israel will resume the military efforts and topple the Hamas regime in Gaza. Yes.
Also joining us to discuss these conversations is Ambassador Prateep Kapoor, who's a former diplomat. Ambassador Kapoor, thank you very much for joining us. I want to take it away from the talks that are happening between Netanyahu and Trump and the sort of press conference that we're going to have in front of the media, and take it to the more sort of undisclosed conversations that are happening between delegates from Israel, Hamas, in Doha. Potentially, do you think this will have more impact on a ceasefire than the conversation that's happening in America?
Yes, it's going to, get things moving faster because of the earlier relationship between Trump and Netanyahu, which has mostly been on an even keel. Trump's primary interest is, of course, always, how it impacts America and whether it is in the interest of America. Now, if there is peace in Gaza, if there is some solution to the long-lasting war there, if they both the sides come to an agreement, and if the second phase of the negotiations begin in Qatar, and if all the remaining hostages are released, there is some permanent end to the war, and there's some ceasefire, and all the countries in the region go back to development aspects. So that sort of focus will be, of course, in the interest of Trump. Now, if Netanyahu plays ball, it'll be easier for Trump to move ahead and support Netanyahu. There are, of course, strong supporters of Israel in the current cabinet, and Trump would also like to move ahead on the Abraham Accords. The negotiations and the discussions between Saudi Arabia and Israel, just when they were about to conclude, had got stopped at that time. He would want to revive that. He would also support Israel in many other ways on the international stage. He did a good thing by, putting out that warning that if Hamas does not stop the war, they will have to pay very big time for anything that they do. So that propelled them to the negotiating table. Otherwise, they were very reluctant or hesitant because delay of any negotiations or agreements they thought were playing to their interest. Suddenly they changed their attitude and they agreed to discuss further and negotiate further. So I think overall it's going to be good for West Asia and going to be good for the world. And Trump is doing a good job there on West Asia to propel the peace forward. Thank you, Joshua.
Ambassador Kapoor, very quickly before we move on. Obviously, Israel have said that they're going to continue with military action after the ceasefire if Hamas still remain in control. What do you think Hamas can do in these ceasefire negotiations that are happening in Doha to make sure, like as you mentioned, there is an actual end to this war and it's not just a continuation of what we saw before the ceasefire deal, but now without Hamas holding the hostages?
Yes, so I guess one thing which Hamas will have to realize is that, like in Lebanon, they have agreed to reimpose that agreement which had been violated earlier by Hezbollah. They will have to, come to terms that any further violation of the peace or any further attacks or any further sort of actions which they took on October 7th of 2023 will not be tolerated this time. So if they do not behave themselves, if they do not keep the peace, if they violate the agreement, then I think the penalties or the impact on their future would be much worse this time. I think because America will be fully behind Israel again to sort of sort them out so that they do not emerge as a threat again in the future. So I think it will be in their interest to come to the negotiating table even after the second phase is over and see how they can reopen the Rafah border, how they can get the aid going again, how they can look after the people who have been displaced, how they can rebuild the country, how they can get back into the development space. So there are a lot of things that they have to do. There are a lot of challenges. The military aspect of it, I think they have to realize is not a solution. If they have to move towards a two-state solution, they will need peace and they will need to be behaving like a proper political party and not like a jihadi terrorist organization.
Ambassador Kapoor and Yeshaya Rosenman, thank you both very much for your time. The situation in Israel and also in Gaza, of course, is continuing to evolve and we will be there for all of those evolutions. We now move to China, who have responded strongly to the US tariff hikes by filing a complaint with the World Trade Organization, arguing that the move was unjustified and violated international trade rules. In retaliation, Beijing announced new tariffs on US goods. Here is the full update.
On Tuesday, China took decisive action in response to the United States' recent tariff hikes, filing a complaint with the World Trade Organization. Beijing argued that Washington's move to increase tariffs on Chinese goods was not only unjustified but also a violation of international trade rules. In retaliation to the US decision, China announced new tariffs of its own. Starting next Monday, Beijing will impose a 15% tariff on US coal and liquefied natural gas imports, alongside a 10% tariff on crude oil, agricultural machinery, and large engine vehicles such as pickup trucks. As the situation continues to unfold, President Trump has signaled that a diplomatic resolution might be possible.
China will be speaking to China probably over the next 24 hours.
Adding to the tensions, China's State Administration for Market Regulation recently announced that it has launched an investigation into US tech giant Google. The agency said that Google is suspected of violating the anti-monopoly law of the People's Republic of China. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We'll now take a look at the latest updates from across North America. Crews have now removed some of the wreckage after the collision in Washington, D.C. The American Airlines plane collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter last week. Both air vehicles crashed into the Potomac River. Fire Chief Gary Steen has stated that out of the 67 victims, 55 have so far been identified. More remains were recovered this Monday and they were in the process of being identified. USAID has closed its headquarters to staff on Monday. Elon Musk and President Donald Trump's controversial aid had been made to shut down the agency. Workers at the US Agency for International Development were told to stay out of its Washington office after its website went dark over the weekend, followed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio announcing on Monday that it would come under his control. In a recent development, Trump's nominee to head the Commerce Department, Howard Lutnick, announced he would review the Biden administration's restrictions on firearms exports. These restrictions, imposed in April 2024, target non-governmental users in 36 countries where US firearms are at risk of diversion. Lutnick pledged that if confirmed, he would ensure the department assesses the policy and takes appropriate action. Ontario, Canada's economic powerhouse, has announced a ban on US companies bidding for billions of dollars in government contracts, followed by cancelling a deal with Elon Musk's Starlink. Premier Doug Ford said that Ontario won't do business with people hell-bent on destroying our economy. He added that the US business would lose out on tens of billions in revenue, blaming President Trump for the fallout. A trial has begun for Hadi Matar, accused of attempting to kill author Salman Rushdie in 2022. Matar is an American of Lebanese descent who faces charges of attempted murder and terrorism for the stabbing attack. The attack left Rushdie, who was 77, blind in one eye and with severe wounds. Matar reportedly believed Rushdie's novel, The Satanic Verses, attacked Islam. Rushdie had been targeted for years over death threats linked to the novel's controversial content. Matar will appear before Judge David Foley today. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visited Texas to inspect military operations at the southern border. The trip is part of President Trump's hard right agenda to increase the military presence. Hegseth will meet US troops stationed in the region. He praised their efforts, saying they are securing the border. Trump had ordered 1,500 additional troops to the border after taking office. Military aircraft have been used for deporting migrants as part of the operations. In a tragic escalation of violence in South Sudan, artillery shelling on the capital of South Kordofan, Kadugli, has left at least 40 people dead and 70 others wounded. The attack has sparked widespread outrage and concern as the devastating war between the army and paramilitary forces rages on. Watch this latest in the report.
Artillery shelling in Sudan's south has killed at least 40 people and wounded about 70. As per reports, the shelling hit the South Kordofan capital of Kadugli under the control of the Sudanese army, which has been at war with the rival paramilitaries since April 2023. In a statement, South Kordofan Governor Mohamed Ibrahim said that the attack was carried out by a faction of SPLMN led by Abdelaziz al-Hilu. SPLMN is a significant armed group that has been a key player in the region's conflict, maintaining a presence in both South Kordofan and Blue Nile. According to two medical sources, the shelling targeted a local market, with the majority of casualties being civilians. Last week, the army broke a siege of its headquarters in the capital and the signal corps in Khartoum North, which had both been encircled by the RSF since the war began. On Saturday, at least 60 people were killed and more than 150 injured when the RSF shelled a busy market in army-controlled Omdurman, part of Greater Khartoum. Both warring sides have been repeatedly accused of targeting civilians and indiscriminately shelling residential areas. The war has killed tens of thousands of people, uprooted more than 12 million and devastated Sudan's fragile infrastructure, forcing most health facilities out of service. The UN's migration agency said on Monday that more than 600,000 people have been displaced from North Darfur since April 2024. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now for the latest from across the world of business. Elon Musk and his team have taken control of the US Treasury Department's payment system. This is prompting a lawsuit that accuses him of unlawfully accessing the privacy data of millions of Americans. Musk, under President Donald Trump's cost-cutting initiative, is facing legal action from labor unions and advocacy groups. The lawsuit seeks a federal judge's ruling to block Doge from accessing taxpayer information. UN member states began negotiations on a global tax agreement aimed at combating tax evasion by wealthy individuals and businesses. However, the United States immediately withdrew from talks. The negotiations, chaired by Egyptian official Rami Youssef, are set to continue until 2027. Currently, international tax matters are largely shaped by wealthy nations in the OECD, leading to criticism from developing countries about their exclusion from decision-making. US manufacturing activity expanded in January for the first time in over 2 years. The Institute for Supply Management's manufacturing index rose to 50.9%, up 1.7 percentage points from November, surpassing expectations of 50%. The index crossing the 50-point mark indicates expansion following 26 months of contraction. The growth came amid improving demand and production. Asian tech stocks rose after US President Donald Trump paused tariffs on Mexico and delayed tariffs on Canada. Gains were broad across Japan, South Korea and Hong Kong, mirroring a rebound in US markets. Japanese semiconductor firms Advantest and Lasertech led the rally, raising 5% and 4.81% respectively. Tokyo Electron, Renesas Electronics and SoftBank also posted gains. Taiwan's TSMC and Foxconn climbed 2.8% and South Korea's Samsung Electronics rose by over 4%. OpenAI and South Korea's top chat app operator Kakao announced a strategic partnership on Tuesday to develop AI products for the Korean market. According to company officials, Kakao will integrate OpenAI's technology into its services. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman also revealed that many Korean companies will play a key role in the US Stargate data center project, but for now they will prefer to keep the details confidential. Prices for American consumers could rise on key goods. Cars may become $3,000 more expensive due to higher costs for imported parts. Popular drinks like Modelo beer, Tennessee whiskey and tequila could see price hikes, while Canadian maple syrup could also become costlier. Lumber tariffs may push up home prices and fuel costs could rise if Canada reduces crude oil exports in response. Avocado prices may also surge, affecting staples like guacamole, especially before major events like the Super Bowl. That's all we have time for, but we'll continue to bring you more of the latest international news updates very soon.